Welcome everyone to A Call for Judgment. I wanted to do this video. You might have heard if you watch most of my videos or all of my videos, I recently was mentioning the Unabomber. I've talked about the Unabomber many times before, but I never actually did a video on him. Well, it turns out that the Unabomber is no longer with us. Now, the reason I'm doing this video isn't just to notify you that the Unabomber is no longer alive. It's a good opportunity to tell you about the Unabomber, because the Unabomber is a perfect example of how psychological operations work on a human being. And now we're seeing a psychological operation done on a mass scale. See, the CIA uses people, or used to use people, as guinea pigs. And that's exactly what Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, was. He went to Harvard at the age of 16, which is pretty unheard of. And of course, when he was there, they did mind control experiments on him, abuse, all sorts of techniques that they use in everyday life now. I'm going to show you the clip of his passing, and then we'll get back into more about the Unabomber for those of you that aren't familiar with the story, because some of you are probably too young to remember.
The man known as the Unabomber died while serving 4 consecutive life sentences, decades after his reign of terror gripped the nation. Ted Kaczynski, the one-time mathematics prodigy, became infamous for eluding authorities. The only clue to his identity? This sketch made after a witness saw him planting a bomb. Kaczynski played a deadly cat-and-mouse game with the FBI in a nationwide bombing campaign that stretched 17 years, becoming one of the Bureau's longest and most expensive investigations ever.
The FBI, the other agencies involved, are working on this with as much diligence as I've ever seen in an investigation.
His first homemade bomb detonated in 1978 at Northwestern University, injuring a security guard. The FBI would dub him a twisted genius for mailing or hand-delivering 15 more bombs over the years. His devices killed 3 and injured nearly 24 more, all while puzzling investigators for leaving behind no traceable evidence. In 1995, the Unabomber Task Force asked newspapers to publish a manifesto Kaczynski mailed them, hoping it would generate new leads. It did, when David Kaczynski recognized the thinking of his brother and reported him to the FBI.
It wouldn't have been right to allow him to hurt anyone else. He had to be stopped in some way, and that was the only way I could think to stop him.
On April 3, 1996, investigators arrested Kaczynski at his tiny cabin near Lincoln, Montana. There, they found journals detailing his crimes, just $32.80 to his name, and something else.
Federal agents have turned up a live bomb at the home of the man the government believes is the Unabomber.
Kaczynski's campaign of fear finally over.
Yes, sir, you're the Unabomber!
You're the Unabomber! Ultimately, in 1998, he said he was, pleading guilty and spending the rest of his life in prison. Dana Griffin, NBC News.
So Kaczynski was somebody who was very against technology, and his manifesto actually was published, which you can wonder both sides of this. Was this CIA agent gone rogue? Did they do this experimentation on him and he went rogue, or did they use him as an assassin for the CIA? One can speculate both sides, but one thing is for sure that can't be argued, that can't be called a conspiracy theory by the mainstream media, and that is that mind control experiments were done on him by Henry Murray and the CIA while he was at Harvard. So again, there's the two perspectives. Did he go rogue from the abuse that he suffered from the mind control experiments, the way that he turned into anti-technology, which you're about to hear, and was very against what was happening with technology going back to the 1960s. Imagine what Ted was thinking to this day in his prison cell before he passed about what was going on in our society, right? Where we have devices monitoring how many steps you're taking. Probably was pretty freaked out. So Kaczynski was either rogue, or he was either an operative for them and they used him as an assassin for 17 years to take people out that they didn't want running certain corporations, airline, CEOs of airlines. You're talking about CEOs of big tech companies back then, before there was, big tech like Apple and Mac and stuff like that, where there's other tech companies that were emerging and they probably wanted to take control. So you can look at it from both perspectives, but here's a look at Ted. His brother's in this clip as well, and you'll hear him talk a little bit. And again, I'm not, some of these people are so psychotic, they would listen to this, they'd be like, he's praising the Unabomber, or something along those lines. No, I'm telling you that the Unabomber was a CIA operative. These serial killers and people like the Unabomber all are psychologically experimented on. They're all used. A lot of the ones who became famous serial killers were operatives for them. They went out and they saw if they could do these experiments on these people, if they would go out and commit the crimes and be assassins for them. Then they made tons of movies about it, including Manchurian Candidate, including the Bourne Identity type movie. So here's Ted Kaczynski. Here's a little look at some of the stuff that they did to him.
You can't live as a free person, as a member of a large-scale system. It's another way to live, and you don't have to live the way we do in this system. I've been against technology ever since 1962.
Ted Kaczynski was accepted to Harvard University at the age of 16, full scholarship. His family thought this was going to be the beginning of a great future.
When Ted arrives at college, it's nothing like what he had dreamed of and hoped for, because he felt isolated, he felt different, he felt rejected at every turn.
Ted basically became a guinea pig in an ethically dubious psychological experiment conducted by Dr. Henry Murray.
They gave a kind of psychological test to incoming freshmen. They selected the people they thought were the most alienated, in effect, the most vulnerable for this study to kind of determine what their breaking point might be.
Henry Murray was using students to study the effect of stress. He did that by subjecting them to long periods of intense interrogation designed to break down their egos, to break down their confidence.
From the time I was a child, I had this realization that my brother was special.
The bomb was placed inside of a book.
16 bombs in 17 years.
I asked Mom, why is he like this?
So again, most of these types of LSD, MK Ultra, and this is a perfect example of MK Ultra mind control, which again, back then they were performing these things. The CIA was getting called out for doing it. You might have seen some of the clips I've used over the years of even President Clinton at the time talking about, some of the unhumane things that the CIA were caught doing, but of course, patting him on the back because he was a CIA operative as well. Most of these guys were involved, obviously, going back to JFK and the formation of the CIA. And now the CIA runs the world for the most part. The central intelligence agencies in every country are the ones responsible for everything going on. And that's why I harp so heavily on psychological operations, because if you can break free psychologically from what they're doing, then they lose control. But they know that they can't, they know that people won't and can't break free. Right? But if you think about it, we think about all these things like, we're going to keep our guns and we're going to do this and we're going to store food. If psychologically people broke away from the damage that they're doing, the destruction that they're doing, think about some of the things in the clip that you just saw where they talked about the psychological damage that was done through abuse. Well, think of the abuse every day that the media is doing to the left and the right. Think about the stuff that they're doing where they're having people mutilate themselves, right? Stuff you can't even talk about. If you speak against it, you're, barred from speech. Right? The same people, obviously, who want to fully take away all of our rights. All of our rights. They want us to have none. They want total control. So Kaczynski had these things done to him. Of course, the media doesn't harp on that. And again, you can look, I'm interested to see what a lot of people out there do think about it. Because, it's an older story. It's not something that's new in the news, but the fact that he passed gives me an opportunity to bring it up. And for some of you to learn about it, because you could probably have heard, I've heard the term Unabomber. Some of you have probably seen occultist Will Ferrell, who I've probably exposed 100 times, or at least 100 different clips and videos that have, of course, been removed over the years. He played him on Saturday Night Live. They made very light of the situation, when the situation should have been what was done to him. And then, of course, over years, they said, they did some experiments on him because you can't hide everything forever. And at some point, they realized that they don't want to hide it. They want to rub it in everyone's faces, which is exactly what they're doing right now. So some of the other stuff you saw with Kaczynski was the guy that I mentioned earlier, who was a CIA operative, who was doing the experiments, Henry Murray. And he even had, you'd see it on the screen, America's Mission, the alternatives, utter destruction or peaceful fellowship, which confront us all. Why only the USA can lead the world to the civilized choice, right? Because they knew even then, these CIA operatives who came in over, from Operation Paperclip, who came over after World War II, they knew that America was going to have to be the ones to destroy everything because America couldn't last and stand on its own, or their mission would never be accomplished, right? So when you hear that quote about only the USA can lead the world into civilized choice, that's what they're trying to do now. They're telling you, oh, only America is going to lead us into this utopian thing and all this stuff that they try to proclaim that they're going to create, when in reality it's just going to be an enslaved society, an imprisoned society. And if they don't agree with how you think or what you say, you will be executed probably on the spot. So these are things that Dr. Henry Murray was talking about then. And then, of course, the reason you might say, well, why was he doing these types of experiments on young college students? Because they wanted to see the effects of psychological damage, psychological operations. And now we see this rampant in everyday life. They don't take people and go, oh, we're going to kidnap or we're going to do an experiment and pay somebody, $500 to let us run tests on them. They're running the tests right now on us day and night. It's called the mainstream media, which the CIA controls. It's called the news, right? And the CIA doesn't care. And you know what? They shouldn't care anymore, because we see the damage that they've done to our society. We see how brain dead certain groups of individuals are. They're completely brain dead. So they sit there and they go, oh, who cares this guy's talking about? Who cares if that guy's talking about us? No one's going to do anything at this point, because they're never going to break free from the psychological damage that we've done. Now, the other thing that's interesting about Kaczynski, if you follow the story, if you've seen documentaries on him, some are pretty good, some are pretty bad. I can't remember the specific one that I saw that was really good. They really just went in depth about the CIA, but they actually went over his manifesto, which led to his arrest because he wanted his manifesto published about technology and the dangers of technology in society and where we were headed as a country. And they finally gave in. It was called The Industrial Society and Its Future, and the New York Times published it. And then eventually he was captured because his brother saw his writing and realized it was him. But they actually go into detail about some of the books that he had read. He read books like The Technological Society. I mean, he was an extremely well-read, I guess you could say, person, and was somebody who could see where we were going as a country. And I'm not patting him on the back, of course, because he's a CIA operative one way or the other. But what I will tell you is that the manifesto is pretty scary if you read it, what his thoughts were back then compared to what's happening now. And The Technological Society by Jacques Ellul is another book that really goes into detail about where we were headed as a society with technology. And if you obviously watch my channel, I've been warning about the dangers of technology, the mark of the beast. And we're literally at the point where they can insert microchips in people's bodies. So, I mean, it's insane what they're capable of doing. At this time when he's doing this stuff, their only cell phone that there was like the car phone that the guys in the 80s movies would have in their car that still had a cord on it that probably only lasted a half hour, battery-wise. And now we have phones that are the size of your hand. It lasts for 5 hours that you could charge in the bath. You can watch sports in the bathroom. I mean, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. So I want to just do a video on his passing because it's important for people to realize that when we hear about these killers and we hear about all these people, right, they want you to think that there's a boogeyman next door. They want you to think that Ted Bundy's lurking in the shadows. They want you, and these people, are they lurking in the shadows? Well, they're creating these people. They're creating, they have a whole channel now, the ID channel, which is really about a lot of just domestic problems that happen compared to mass events, mass killings and things like that, which still do occur. But they create these people. All the ones that they glorify, the serial killers, all have connections to the CIA, including him, right? He has connections not just to the CIA, he has connections to being involved in MK Ultra, right? But that's not something they cover, of course. That's not something they make a big deal about. There's how does somebody become so crazy? Well, look at our society now. You ask yourself how these people have become so crazy where they're chopping their nuts off? Yeah, because psychological operations are being done on a daily basis, and that's what's important to note. They're creating people like this. For every one of us, there's people who are Ted Kaczynskis, right? And they identify as a certain political group. We see the insane ideologies. We see the insane things that they do. We see how unhinged they get. And this is all done because of all the experiments they've done on other people over the years. And now with technology being so easy to access, they've got control over everyone's minds. And if people don't break free from the psychological operations that our own government is doing on us, then it's never going to go back to normal and things are never going to, be okay. And we all know biblically they're not going to go back. We're at the point of no return, and they know that. And they don't care anymore because they know that the majority of these people who are under a spell are not going to break free from their spell. I thank everyone for being here. I hope you're doing well. Let me know what you think in the comment section. If you're familiar with the story, even if you're not familiar, if you learned something from the video, I'm interested to see. It's an interesting topic to me when I see a lot of these people, because I know, I run into people and they're like, oh yeah, I watched this interesting, documentary on Netflix, or, have you ever seen this series about Bundy, and I'm always just like, yeah, who they really are. I mean, you're seeing like the fuddy-duddy, lollipopped up version of the story, which is still horrifying, which, obviously these things, these types of stories did occur, right? But you don't hear the background story. Oh, did you know that they were a part of the government? Did you know they worked for the CIA at one point? Did you know, this even goes to people like Manson. I mean, Manson's connected to the CIA, right? And mind control, MK Ultra experiments with LSD and everything else, right? And people just don't even they can't dig into that level. They stay on a surface level where they're fascinated by these people. It's like their soul's tugging them to tell them what's actually happening. But they just stick to the story. Isn't that freaky? Isn't it this and that? And yeah, it's freaky. It's disturbing. It's disgusting. It's sick. And then they're like, well, how does somebody get to that point? They're like, oh, did you know he was abused as a child? Well, did you know that mind control experiments were done on them? Did you know they were involved in these types of things and they were sent out as assassins? No. And then when they hear that, they're like, oh, stop it. And of course, these are the same people that are telling us that, telling us some of the most insane things we've ever heard right now in our society that we should allow and accept. And that's why we are where we are. I thank everyone for being here. Hope you're doing well. God bless you and your families.